Jack Morrison stood at the window of the observation deck, watching the stars move slowly past. He had been doing this same thing every night for the past 6 months. The stars looked peaceful from here, but Jack knew better. Out there somewhere, in the darkness, enemies were waiting. The ship he lived on was called the USS Thunderbolt. It was a big warship with thick armor and powerful guns. Jack worked here as a junior tactical officer, which meant he helped plan battles and worked with the ship's weapons. He was not very important on the ship. Most people barely noticed him. Jack was 28 years old and had been in the military for 7 years. He came from a small town on Earth where nothing exciting ever happened. His parents wanted him to be a farmer like his father, but Jack wanted to see the galaxy. So he joined the Space Navy when he turned 18. The Thunderbolt was home to 847 people. The captain was a tough woman named Amanda Clark. She had fought in many battles and had scars on her face to prove it. Captain Clark was respected by everyone on the ship. She was fair but strict. When she gave an order, people followed it without question. The second in command was Lieutenant Commander Ryan Phillips. He was a smart man who had studied at the best military schools. Phillips noticed everything that happened on the ship. He knew every crew member by name and watched how they did their jobs. Lately, he had been watching Jack Morrison more closely. Jack had been spending extra time in the simulation rooms. These were special rooms where soldiers could practice fighting battles that were not real. The computers would create fake enemy ships and fake battles. Jack would spend hours fighting these pretend battles, trying different ways to win. Most soldiers used the simulation rooms to practice the same things they learned in training, but Jack was different. He was practicing battles that were much harder than anything he might face in his real job. He was learning to fight against enemies that had better weapons and more ships. When Phillips asked Jack why he was doing this, Jack said, "I just want to be ready, sir." But there was something in his eyes that made Phillips think there was more to it than that. The Thunderbolt's job was to patrol the space between human territory and the territory of an alien race called the Kethver. The Kethver looked like giant lizards that walked on 2 legs. They were strong and fast and very good at fighting. For 50 years, humans and Kethver had been enemies. The war between humans and Kethver was not a hot war with battles happening every day. It was a cold war with both sides watching each other and preparing for the big fight that everyone knew would come someday. Ships like the Thunderbolt patrolled the border, making sure the other side did not try to sneak across. Jack worked with many good people on the Thunderbolt. Carlos Rodriguez was the chief engineer. He was a friendly man who could fix anything on the ship. Linda Foster worked in communications. She could speak 12 different languages and could talk to almost anyone in the galaxy. Kevin Wright was a young pilot who flew the ship's small fighter craft. Dr. Susan Baker was the ship's doctor who took care of everyone when they got hurt or sick. Even though Jack worked with all these people, he spent most of his free time alone. While other crew members played games or watched movies together, Jack would go to the observation deck and look at the stars. He would think about the war and wonder when it would really begin. Jack had studied everything he could about the Kethver. He read every battle report he could find. He studied their ships and their weapons. He learned their language, even though most humans thought this was a waste of time. Jack believed that if you wanted to beat an enemy, you had to understand them. The Kethver were proud warriors. They believed that strength was the most important thing in the universe. They respected brave enemies but had no mercy for cowards. Their ships were faster and stronger than human ships, and their weapons were more advanced, but Jack had noticed something that other humans had missed. The Kethver always fought the same way. They used the same formations and the same tactics in every battle. They were very good at what they did, but they never changed. Jack thought this might be a weakness he could use. Every night, Jack would stand at the observation deck window and think about this. He would imagine different ways to fight the Kethver. He would picture battles in his mind, trying to find new ways to win against a stronger enemy. The other crew members thought Jack was just quiet and shy. They did not know that he was preparing for something big. They did not know that he spent hours every day studying and learning and planning. Captain Clark had noticed Jack too, but she was not sure what to think of him. His work was always perfect, but he never volunteered for extra duties. He followed orders exactly, but he never offered his own ideas. She had written in his file that he was competent but unremarkable. The Thunderbolt had been patrolling the same area of space for 3 months. Every day was the same. They would scan for enemy ships, check on human settlements, and report back to headquarters. It was boring work, but it was important. The peace between humans and Keth was fragile, and ships like the Thunderbolt helped keep it from breaking. Jack's daily routine never changed. He would wake up at 0600 hours, eat breakfast, and report to his duty station. He would work for 8 hours, monitoring sensors and updating tactical reports. Then he would eat dinner, spend time in the simulation rooms, and end his day at the observation deck, but today felt different. Jack could not explain why, but something in the air felt wrong. The sensors showed nothing unusual. The radio was quiet. Everything seemed normal, but Jack's instincts told him that something was about to happen. He had learned to trust his instincts during his 7 years in the military. They had saved his life more than once during training exercises. Today, his instincts were screaming that danger was coming. Jack looked out at the stars and wondered if tonight would be the last peaceful night he would ever see. He thought about his parents back on Earth, working their farm and living their quiet lives. He thought about his sister Mary, who was a teacher in the city. He wondered if he would ever see them again. The communications system crackled to life. All hands, this is the bridge. We have detected a vessel approaching from Keth space. It appears to be a merchant ship, but we are investigating. All departments report readiness status. Jack's heart started beating faster. This was it. This was the moment he had been preparing for. He took one last look at the stars, then turned and walked quickly toward his duty station. As he walked through the corridors of the Thunderbolt, Jack passed other crew members who were also hurrying to their posts. Everyone could feel the tension in the air. After 3 months of routine patrols, something was finally happening. Jack reached his station and began checking his equipment. All of his systems were working perfectly. His screens showed the tactical situation clearly. One small ship was approaching from enemy territory. It looked harmless, but Jack's instincts told him it was anything but harmless. He opened his personal files and began reviewing the tactical plans he had been working on for months. If his suspicions were correct, he would need every advantage he could get. The real war was about to begin, and Jack Morrison was ready for it. The merchant ship was not what it seemed. Jack Morrison watched his screens as the small vessel continued toward the Thunderbolt. Something about its movement patterns bothered him. Real merchant ships flew in straight lines to save fuel. This ship was making tiny course corrections every few minutes. Captain Clark stood on the bridge, studying the approaching vessel. "Hail them," she ordered Communications Officer Linda Foster. "Ask them to identify themselves and state their business." Linda worked at her station, sending the standard greeting message. Minutes passed with no response. She tried again, this time in the Keth language. Still nothing. "Captain," called out sensor operator Pete Wilson from his station, "I'm getting strange readings from that ship. The energy signature doesn't match any known merchant vessel design." Jack felt his stomach tighten. His instincts had been right. This was a trap. He wanted to speak up, but junior officers did not give advice to captains unless asked. He watched and waited, his hands ready at his controls. "Red alert," Captain Clark announced. "All hands to battle stations. This smells like trouble." The lights on the bridge dimmed and turned red. Throughout the ship, alarm bells rang as 847 crew members rushed to their posts. Jack's tactical station came alive with information as the ship's weapons and defense systems powered up. "Captain," reported Chief Engineer Carlos Rodriguez over the intercom. "All systems are ready. Weapons charged, shields at full power." The merchant ship was now close enough for detailed scans. Jack studied the readings and felt his blood turn cold. The ship's hull was too thick for a merchant vessel. Its engines were too powerful. and there were energy readings that suggested hidden weapons. "Captain," Jack said quietly to Lieutenant Commander Phillips, who was standing near his station. "Sir, I think we should move the ship, now." Phillips looked at him with surprise. "Why, Morrison?" "That's not a merchant ship, sir. Look at the scan data. It's a warship pretending to be a merchant vessel." Phillips studied Jack's screen. His eyes widened as he saw what Jack had seen. "Captain," he called out, "Morrison has spotted something important." Captain Clark walked over to Jack's station. "What is it, Morrison?" Jack pointed to his screen. "Captain, this ship is not what it appears to be. The hull thickness, the engine power, the energy signatures, they all suggest this is a military vessel. And if they're using one ship as bait—" Before Jack could finish his sentence, space around the Thunderbolt exploded with light. 12 HFY warships materialized out of nowhere, their cloaking devices dropping as they opened fire. The trap had been sprung. The first salvo of enemy weapons hit the Thunderbolt like a hammer. The ship shook violently as energy blasts pounded against the shields. Jack was thrown against his console, but he held on and kept working. "Shields down to 60%, shouted Wilson from his station. "Multiple enemy contacts surrounding us." Captain Clark grabbed the ship's communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We are under attack by HFY forces. This is not a drill. Fight hard and stay alive." The bridge filled with smoke. As several control panels overloaded, Jack could smell burning circuits and see sparks flying from damaged equipment. The Thunderbolt had been built for war, but it was one ship against 12. "Return fire," ordered Captain Clark. "Target the nearest enemy ship." The Thunderbolt's main guns fired back at the HFY ships. The bright energy beams reached out across space, but the enemy ships were moving too fast. Most of the shots missed their targets. "Captain, their technology is more advanced than our intelligence report suggested," called out Tactical Officer Dan Brooks from the primary tactical station. "Their shields are absorbing our weapons fire with minimal damage." Jack watched the battle unfold on his screens. The enemy ships were using formation tactics he had never seen before. They moved like a pack of wolves, surrounding the Thunderbolt and attacking from all sides. Their weapons were more powerful than anything in the human fleet. A massive explosion rocked the ship. Jack looked up to see Captain Clark falling to the deck, blood streaming from a head wound. A control panel had exploded right next to her position. "Medical team to the bridge!" Phillips shouted as he knelt beside the unconscious captain. Dr. Susan Baker and her team rushed onto the bridge with medical equipment. "She's alive but unconscious," Dr. Baker reported after checking Captain Clark. "Severe concussion. She needs immediate surgery." Phillips stood up, his face grim. As the second in command, he was now in charge of the ship. "Get her to medical bay. I have command of this vessel." The battle continued to rage around them. Jack watched as the HFY ships closed in for the kill. Their weapons were systematically destroying the Thunderbolt systems. The shield generators were failing, the main engines were damaged, and half the weapons were offline. "Sir," reported Brooks from the tactical station, "primary weapons control is down. I'm losing targeting systems across the board." Phillips looked around the damaged bridge. Smoke was everywhere, and the lights flickered as power systems failed. "How long can we last?" "At this rate, maybe 10 minutes, Brooks replied. "Their weapons are too advanced. Our shields can't take much more punishment." Jack studied his screens intensely. The enemy ships were using a complex attack pattern, but there was something familiar about it. He had seen this formation before in the old battle records he had studied. The HFY had used this same tactic in previous battles. "Commander Phillips," Jack said, "I need to tell you something important." Phillips looked at him with exhausted eyes. "What is it, Morrison?" "I've been studying HFY battle tactics for months. I know this attack pattern. I've seen it in historical records." "Can you counter it?" Jack hesitated. What he was about to suggest went against everything he had been taught about space combat. "Maybe, sir. But it would require doing something very dangerous." Another explosion shook the ship. The lights went out completely for several seconds before the emergency power kicked in. When they came back on, Phillips could see that several more control stations had been destroyed. Morrison, I don't care how dangerous it is. If you have an idea, I need to hear it. Jack took a deep breath. The Kethver always fight the same way. They use the same formations, the same tactics. They're very good at what they do, but they never change. I think I can use that against them. How? They expect us to fight like humans always fight. They expect us to try to match their technology with our technology. But what if we don't do what they expect? Phillips stared at him. You're talking about abandoning standard combat doctrine. Yes, sir, I am. The ship shook again as more enemy. Fire hit the weakening shields. Phillips looked around the bridge at his damaged ship and wounded crew. They were losing this battle badly. In a few more minutes, they would all be dead. Brooks is unconscious, Phillips said, looking at the primary tactical officer who had been knocked out by falling debris. Morrison, I'm putting you in charge of tactical. Do whatever you think will work. Jack felt a surge of fear and excitement. This was his chance to prove that all his studying and planning had been worth something. He moved to the primary tactical station and began working frantically. The enemy ships were closing in for the final attack. Their weapons were charging for what would certainly be a killing blow. Jack had maybe 2 minutes to save the ship and everyone on it. His hands flew across the controls as he began to implement a plan that would either save them all or kill them all. There was no middle ground. Jack Morrison was about to discover what kind of man he really was. Jack Morrison's hands moved quickly across the tactical controls. The enemy ships were getting closer, and their weapons were almost ready to fire the final shots that would destroy the Thunderbolt. He had one chance to save everyone on the ship. What are you doing, Morrison? Asked Lieutenant Commander Phillips, watching Jack work at the controls. Something crazy, sir, Jack replied without looking up. I'm going to make them think we're giving up. Jack's plan was simple but dangerous. He had studied how the Kethver fought, and he knew they followed the same patterns every time. They were like a machine that always did the same thing. But humans were different. Humans could do things that made no sense, and sometimes that was exactly what worked. All hands, prepare for emergency maneuvers, Jack announced over the ship's communication system. This is going to be rough. The Kethver ships had formed a circle around the Thunderbolt. Their weapons were charged and ready to fire. Jack could see on his screens that they were preparing for what they called a killing formation, a pattern designed to destroy an enemy ship completely. Morrison, our shields are down to 20%, reported sensor operator Wilson. We can't take another hit like that? Jack nodded but kept working. I know. That's why we're not going to let them hit us. What Jack did next surprised everyone on the bridge. Instead of trying to make the shields stronger, he turned them off completely. The Thunderbolt was now floating in space with no protection at all. Morrison, what are you doing? Phillips shouted. You just turned off our shields? Yes, sir. And now I'm redirecting all that power to the engines and weapons. Jack's fingers flew across the controls as he moved energy from the ship's defensive systems to its offensive systems. The Kethver ship saw the Thunderbolt's shields disappear. To them, this looked like a ship that was dying. Their sensors showed a vessel with no defenses and failing systems. They moved closer, eager to claim the honor of destroying the human ship. Sir, all enemy ships are moving in, reported Wilson. They're abandoning their formation. Jack smiled grimly. Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted them to do. The enemy ships were now much closer than they had been before. They were so confident that the Thunderbolt was finished that they had stopped being careful. This was the moment Jack had been waiting for. Hold on to something, Jack warned everyone on the bridge. We're going to accelerate to maximum speed. The Thunderbolt suddenly shot forward like a bullet fired from a gun. The ship's engines, now receiving triple their normal power, pushed the vessel faster than it had ever moved before. Jack aimed the ship directly at the largest enemy vessel, the Kethver flagship. Morrison, you're going to ram them. Phillips realized what Jack was planning. Maybe, Jack replied. But probably not. The Kethver flagship was caught completely off guard. They had expected the human ship to try to run away or to fight back with long-range weapons. They had not expected it to charge straight at them like an angry bull. The flagship's captain tried to turn his ship away from the approaching Thunderbolt. But Kethver ships were not designed for quick turns. They were built for strength and firepower, not speed and maneuverability. As the Thunderbolt raced toward the enemy flagship, Jack prepared for the most dangerous part of his plan. He had to time everything perfectly, or they would all die in the next few seconds. "All weapons, target the flagship's reactor core," Jack ordered. "Wait for my signal." The distance between the two ships shrank rapidly. The Thunderbolt was moving so fast that it would reach the enemy ship in less than 30 seconds. On the enemy vessel, alarms were ringing as the crew realized they were about to be rammed. Jack watched the countdown on his screen. 20 seconds. 15 seconds. Seconds. Fire all weapons. Jack shouted. Every gun on the Thunderbolt fired at the same time. The weapons, supercharged with power from the shield generators, shot beams of energy that were 3 times more powerful than normal. These beams struck the Kethver flagship at point-blank range. Hitting the ship's reactor core, the explosion was enormous. The enemy flagship was torn apart from the inside as its reactor overloaded. The blast was so bright that everyone on the Thunderbolt's bridge had to shield their eyes. "Hard turn to port," Jack commanded. "Emergency reverse thrust." The Thunderbolt turned sharply to the left, barely missing the exploding enemy ship. Pieces of the destroyed flagship flew past them, some of them striking the human ship's hull. "Damage report," Phillips called out. "Hull damage on decks 7 and 8, reported Carlos Rodriguez from engineering. "But we're still in one piece." Jack looked at his tactical display. The enemy flagship was gone, but 11 Kethver ships remained. However, something had changed. The enemy ships had stopped moving. They were just floating in space, not attacking. "Sir, the enemy ships are not firing," reported Wilson. "They're just waiting." Jack studied the enemy formation. He had destroyed their flagship, but more importantly, he had done something that the Kethver had never seen before. He had used tactics that made no sense according to their understanding of warfare. "They're confused," Jack realized. "They don't know what to do." The Kethver were excellent warriors, but they were also very rigid in their thinking. They had rules for everything, including how battles should be fought. Jack had just broken all of those rules. "Morrison, we still have 11 enemy ships out there," Phillips reminded him. "What do we do now?" Jack thought for a moment. He had destroyed one enemy ship, but the Thunderbolt was still badly damaged. The shields were still offline, and many of the ship's systems were not working properly. In a normal fight, they would still lose, but Jack had an idea. The Kethver were not just confused. They were also impressed. In their culture, courage was the most important thing a warrior could have. What Jack had just done was either very brave or very crazy, maybe both. "Sir, I want to try something," Jack said. "I want to talk to them." Phillips looked at him like he was insane. "Talk to them?" "Morrison, they're trying to kill us." "No, sir, not anymore. Look at their formation. They're not in attack position. They're waiting to see what we do next." Jack was right. The enemy ships had moved into a defensive formation, but they were not charging their weapons. They were watching and waiting. "Linda, can you open a communication channel to the enemy fleet?" Jack asked. Communications Officer Linda Foster looked at Phillips, who nodded. "Channel open," she reported. Jack took a deep breath. He was about to do something that had never been done before in the history of human Kethver warfare. He was going to talk to the enemy in the middle of a battle. "This is Jack Morrison of the human vessel Thunderbolt," he said in the Kethver language. "I wish to speak with your fleet commander." There was a long pause. Then a deep, growling voice answered, "This is War Leader Thekvar. You destroyed our flagship with honor, human. We acknowledge your courage." Phillips and the other humans on the bridge stared at Jack in amazement. Not only was he speaking the enemy language, but the enemy was actually answering him. "War Leader Thekvar," Jack continued, "I challenge you to single combat. Your ship against mine. Winner takes all. The bridge fell silent. Jack had just challenged the entire enemy fleet to a duel. The silence on the bridge was complete. Everyone stared at Jack Morrison as if he had lost his mind. He had just challenged an entire enemy fleet to single combat. Lieutenant Commander Phillips opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. You challenge me to single combat? War leader Thekvar's voice came through the communication system. The alien leader sounded surprised but also interested. Yes, Jack replied in the Keth language. Your ship against mine. No interference. From other vessels. The winner decides what happens to both fleets. Jack knew he was taking a huge risk. The Thunderbolt was damaged and outgunned. But he also knew something about Kethver culture that most humans did not understand. They valued honor above everything else. To them, a brave challenge was more important than superior weapons. Morrison, what are you doing? Phillips whispered urgently. Jack covered the microphone with his hand. Sir, trust me, I've studied their culture for months. They can't refuse a direct challenge without losing face in front of their own people. There was another long pause. Jack could imagine War Leader Thekvar talking with his officers, trying to decide what to do. The alien leader was in a difficult position. If he accepted the challenge and lost, his career would be over. If he refused the challenge, he would be seen as a coward. Very well, Human Morrison, Thekvar finally answered. I accept your challenge. But know that I have never lost a single combat in 30 years of warfare. Jack felt his heart pounding in his chest. He had gotten what he wanted, but now he had to face the consequences. He would be fighting the best warrior in the Kethver fleet. The other ships will not interfere, Thekvar continued. This is between you and me. When one of us is defeated, the battle ends. Agreed, Jack said. Let's begin. The communication channel closed. Jack turned to face Phillips and the other officers on the bridge. They were all looking at him with expressions of shock and fear. Morrison, that ship is 3 times our size, Phillips said. It has better weapons, better armor, and a crew that's been fighting wars since before you were born. Yes, sir, but it also has something else, Jack replied. It has a captain who thinks he knows exactly how this fight will go. Jack moved back to his tactical station and began preparing for the duel. The Thunderbolt was still damaged from the earlier battle, but its main weapons were working. More importantly, Jack had a plan. Wilson, give me a full scan of the enemy flagship, Jack ordered. I want to know everything about that ship. The sensor operator worked at his station, gathering information about their opponent. It's a Kethver. Heavy cruiser, he reported. Twice our mass, 50% more weapons and shields that are still at full strength. Jack studied the scan data carefully. The enemy ship was impressive, but it was also predictable. Kethver ships were built for frontal assault. They were designed to face their enemies directly and overwhelm them with superior firepower. Linda. Patch me through to the engine room, Jack said. Rodriguez here, came the voice of the chief engineer. Carlos, I need everything you can give me from the engines. Can you squeeze out any more power? We're already running at maximum, Jack. The engines are being pushed harder than they were designed for. I need more, just for a few minutes. There was a pause. I can give you maybe 10% more power, but it will be dangerous. The engines might not survive. Do it? Jack turned his attention back to the tactical display. The enemy ship was moving into position for the duel. It was a beautiful vessel, sleek and deadly, with weapons that could destroy the Thunderbolt in seconds if used properly. All hands, prepare for combat, Jack announced over the ship's communication system. This is going to be the fight of our lives. The 2 ships faced each other across the empty space. The Thunderbolt looked small and damaged compared to the Kethver cruiser, but Jack was not worried about appearances. He was focused on the battle ahead. Enemy ship is charging weapons, reported Wilson. They're preparing to fire. Jack watched his screens intently. The enemy captain was doing exactly what Jack had expected. He was preparing for a traditional ship-to-ship duel where both vessels would face each other and trade shots until one was destroyed. Sir, shouldn't we charge our weapons too? asked one of the junior officers. Not yet, Jack replied. I want to see what he does first. The Keth cruiser fired first. Bright beams of energy shot across space toward the Thunderbolt. But instead of trying to block the shots with shields, Jack did something unexpected. He made the ship move. Hard turn to starboard, Jack commanded. Emergency acceleration. The Thunderbolt twisted to the right and shot forward just as the enemy weapons reached where it had been. The energy beams passed harmlessly through empty space. Impossible, came Dekvar's voice over the communication channel. How can such a large ship move so quickly? Jack smiled. The Kethver had never seen a human ship fight like this because human ships had never needed to fight like this. The Thunderbolt was moving like a fighter craft instead of a heavy cruiser. Return fire, Jack ordered. Target their engine section. The Thunderbolt's weapons fired at the enemy ship's rear section. The shots hit their target, causing small explosions along the enemy vessel's hull, but the damage was minimal. The Kethver ship's armor was too thick. We're not doing enough damage, Phillips observed. Their armor is absorbing our shots. Jack had expected this. The enemy ship was too well protected for a direct assault. He would need to be more clever. Wilson, scan for weak points in there. Hull, Jack ordered. Every ship has them. The sensor operator worked frantically at his station. I'm finding several areas where the armor is thinner, he reported, mostly around the weapon ports and sensor arrays. Jack studied the tactical display. The enemy ship was turning to face them again, preparing for another attack. This time, Dekvar would not be caught off guard. Carlos, how much more power can the engines take? Jack asked over the intercom. Maybe 5 more minutes at this level, Rodriguez replied. After that, they'll start shutting down. Jack nodded. 5 minutes would have to be enough. He had one chance to end this fight before the Thunderbolt's engines gave out completely. The enemy ship fired again, but this time Jack was ready. He had studied Kethver gunnery patterns and knew exactly when they would shoot. The Thunderbolt dodged the incoming fire and continued its attack run. All weapons, target the sensor array on their port side, Jack commanded. Fire on my mark. The Thunderbolt raced toward the enemy ship at maximum speed. The two vessels were now so close that Jack could see the details of the Kethver ship's hull through the observation windows. Mark! Jack shouted. Every weapon on the Thunderbolt fired at the same small target. The concentrated firepower overwhelmed the enemy ship's defenses in that one spot. The sensor array exploded in a shower of sparks and debris. Direct hit, Wilson reported. We've blinded them on their port side. Jack was already planning his next move. The enemy ship could no longer see attacks coming from its left side. This gave the Thunderbolt a crucial advantage. Hard turn to port, Jack ordered. Stay in their blind spot. The battle continued, with Jack using every trick he had learned to stay ahead of his more powerful opponent. The duel was far from over, but for the first time, Jack thought they might actually have a chance to win. The duel had been going on for 47 minutes. Jack Morrison's hands were covered in sweat as he controlled the Thunderbolt through the most difficult battle of his life. The enemy ship was damaged but still dangerous. Both vessels were running low on power, and both crews were exhausted. Sir, engine power is down to 30%, reported Chief Engineer Carlos Rodriguez over the intercom. We can't keep this up much longer. Jack nodded but kept his eyes on the tactical display. The Kethver cruiser was also showing signs of damage. He had managed to destroy 2 of their weapon systems and damage their main engines. But war leader Dekvar was still fighting hard. Morrison, you fight like no human I have ever seen, came Dekvar's voice over the communication channel. But this battle must end soon. One of us will not survive. Jack knew the alien leader was right. Both ships were badly damaged. The next few minutes would decide who lived and who died. He had to end this fight quickly. Wilson, scan their ship again, Jack ordered. I need to find their weak spot. The sensor operator worked at his damaged console. Sir, their main reactor is showing stress fractures. If we could hit it with enough force, it might cause a chain reaction. Jack studied the scan data. The enemy reactor was heavily protected, but there was one way to reach it. It would require getting very close to the enemy ship and firing at exactly the right moment. "Phillips, I need you to trust me one more time," Jack said to the lieutenant. "Commander, what are you planning now?" Phillips asked, though he already suspected he would not like the answer. "I'm going to ram them." Everyone on the bridge turned to stare at Jack. The idea of ramming an enemy ship was not just dangerous, it was usually suicide for both vessels. "Morrison, that's insane," Phillips said. "Even if we survive the impact, we'll both be destroyed." "Not if I do it right," Jack replied. "I'm not going to hit them directly. I'm going to scrape along their hull and fire point blank into their reactor core." Jack began preparing for the most dangerous maneuver of the entire battle. He redirected all remaining power to the engines and weapons. The Thunderbolt would have no shields and no defensive systems, but it would have maximum offensive power. "All hands, brace for impact," Jack announced over the ship's communication system. "This is going to be rough." The Thunderbolt accelerated toward the enemy ship at maximum speed. War Leader Thekvar saw what Jack was planning and tried to turn his vessel away, but the Kethver cruiser was too damaged to move quickly. "You are either the bravest human alive or the most foolish," Thekvar said over the radio. "Maybe both," Jack replied. The two ships rushed toward each other like ancient knights on horseback. At the last second, Jack made a tiny course correction. That would bring the Thunderbolt alongside the enemy vessel instead of directly into it. The human ship scraped along the hull of the Kethver cruiser with a sound like thunder. Sparks flew as metal touched metal. Jack waited until he was directly over the enemy reactor, then fired every weapon the Thunderbolt had left. The concentrated firepower punched through the damaged armor and struck the reactor core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the enemy ship began to shake as internal explosions rocked the vessel. "Their reactor is overloading," Wilson shouted. "It's going to explode." Jack pulled the Thunderbolt away from the enemy ship just as the reactor reached critical levels. The Kethver cruiser shuddered once, then went dark. Emergency lights flickered on as the main power systems failed. "This is War Leader Thekvar," came a weak voice over the communication channel. "My ship is dead. You have won this battle, human." Morrison, Jack slumped back in his chair, exhausted. He had done it. He had defeated the most feared warrior in the Kethver fleet. But as the reality of his victory sank in, he realized something important. He had the power to destroy 11 enemy ships and their crews. "Sir, what are your orders?" Phillips asked. "The enemy fleet is waiting for your decision," Jack thought carefully. The traditional response would be to demand the surrender of the entire enemy fleet. He could take their ships as prizes and their crews as prisoners. It would be a great victory for humanity, but Jack remembered something from his studies of Kethver culture. These were proud warriors who valued honor above their own lives. If he humiliated them, they would become enemies forever. But if he showed them respect, something different might happen. "Open a channel to all enemy ships," Jack said. "Channel open," reported Linda Foster. "This is Jack Morrison," he said in the Kethver language. "I have defeated your war leader in fair combat. According to your laws, your fleet now belongs to me." There was silence from the enemy ships. Jack could imagine the alien crews waiting to hear their fate. "However," Jack continued, "I do not wish to take your ships or your freedom. You fought with honor today. You may return to your territory with your weapons and your pride." The silence continued for several long minutes. Then War Leader Thekvar's voice came over the radio, speaking slowly and with great emotion. "Human. Morrison, in 30 years of warfare, no enemy has ever shown such mercy to my people. You could have taken everything from us, but instead you give us our freedom. This is the act of a true warrior. I believe our peoples can coexist without constant war," Jack replied. "Today's battle was fought with honor on both sides. Let it be the beginning of understanding between us." What happened next surprised everyone, including Jack. War Leader Thekvar began speaking in the ancient Kethver ceremonial language. It was a ritual that had not been performed in over a century. "By the ancient laws of my people," Thekvar said, I name you Warrior of the First Star. This title has never been given to one who is not Kethver. You have earned it through courage, skill, and honor. The ceremony was being broadcast to both fleets. Every human and every Kethver in the area heard the alien leader declare, Jack Morrison a warrior of the highest rank in their society. Furthermore, Thekvar continued, let it be known throughout the galaxy that Jack Morrison fought and won the greatest single combat in the history of our two peoples. He is a legend among warriors, and his name will be remembered forever. Over the next several hours, the two fleets worked together to rescue survivors and repair damaged ships. Jack found himself talking with Kethver officers who had been enemies just hours before. They treated him with the respect reserved for their greatest heroes. News of the Battle of Kepler's Gate spread quickly through human space. Within days, every military base and every civilian settlement had heard the story of the junior officer who had defeated an entire enemy fleet through courage and clever tactics. Jack Morrison was promoted to captain within a month. Within a year he was an admiral. But more importantly, his victory had changed the relationship between humans and Kethver forever. The two species began talking instead of just fighting. The war that everyone had expected never happened. Instead, the former enemies became allies, working together to explore the galaxy and defend against common threats. Years later, when military historians wrote about the most important battles in human history, they always mentioned the Battle of Kepler's Gate. It was the day when one man's courage and wisdom changed the course of history. Jack Morrison had become exactly what war leader Thekvar had called him, a legend among soldiers across the stars. His name was spoken with respect on 1,000 worlds, and his tactics were studied in military academies throughout the galaxy, but Jack himself remained humble. When asked about his victory, he would always say the same thing, I just did what seemed right at the time.